Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. Today I'm going to be talking about a film that I love to death as a thing like Goosebumps. Now this particular movie was co-written with George Romero, and it was also directed by George Romero. It's a 1968 film that pretty much created an entire horror genre that definitely influenced Goosebumps in many a way. And this film is called Night of the Living Dead. Yeah. This is great. I forgot how good this movie was. I haven't seen it in about 3 or 4 or 5 years, somewhere in there. I think it's been about 4 years since I've watched it last. This is an uncut version. I have 2 copies of the film, but I'm not sure if the other version that I have is an uncut version, if that actually exists or not. I will tell you up front, just for anybody who might immediately be interested in this, especially you younger folks who are not the age of 18 or whatever, there is like one part in this film that there's a little bit of nudity. And it's very quick, very brief, but still, it's there. I just thought I'd mention that. It's a little weird to put that in the front of my review, but anyway, thing like Goosebumps, Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is such a great horror film in general. This basically created the zombie genre. And yeah, there were zombie films before this, like White Zombie with Bela Lugosi. And this film doesn't even use the word zombie. It calls them ghouls and flesh eaters and all kinds of stuff. But everything you essentially know from things like The Walking Dead and so many other different zombie things out there, most of their rules about the brain being destroyed and stuff like that come from this movie. And mainly from John Russo, I'm not really sure how you say his name. He's also the co-writer of this, but he wrote the novella short story thing that ended up becoming this. I actually own that. It's in a book with Return of the Living Dead, which is also a little novella thing that he wrote. I haven't read those, like I said, but I do own them. And John Russo, from what I understand, a lot of this story is something that he came up with. George Romero did a lot of the directing stuff that works very well. I really love the movie. I love that it's in black and white, even though there was color films at this particular time. Think of something like on TV, like Star Trek, that was in color. This movie, I could not see being put in color. If it was, it wouldn't be as good, in my opinion. I love the film. I think it's so just eerie and dark. It has such a great atmosphere to it. It's such a memorable horror film that is so underappreciated and underrespected, in my opinion. Very much like the Universal Classic Monsters films with people my age and people younger than me and the younger generations now that haven't seen these movies because we're so used to watching so many bigger, more modern things like the MCU and the DCEU and whatnot. But when it comes to horror, horror is basically dead right now. And things like this are really bringing a revival to myself and my love for horror, or at least old classical horror. And Night of the Living Dead was one of the first black and white horror films I ever saw. Anything that was pre-1980 something. Just because I just didn't like black and white films growing up. But this is one of the ones, like the Universal Monsters flicks, that got me into the black and white horror movie genre because they can be utilized so well and you can do scares a lot better. Atmosphere is done a whole lot better. Yeah, a lot of the black and white horror films are slower, but that's not the case with Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead is just iconic. I mean, there's no other word for it. It's just an iconic film. I think the social commentary thing people always refer to is BS. I don't think it's actually in the film. I think a lot of people are just, posting that on there with their own mental wants. But the film itself, I just love. I love it, the fact that it's just involving, it's engaging, the acting is good, the writing is good, I would say. There's a lot of eventful things that happen in the film itself that just build attention all the way to this really surprising ending. Every time I watch the film, I'm always surprised by how good the ending is and how good that build-up is to the end. For anybody who hasn't seen the film, of course, like I said, the title itself was clearly an influence on R.L. Stine for Goosebumps. He was constantly inspired, I believe, from people like Ray Bradbury and a lot of these old black and white horror films that everybody loved growing up. Like my grandfather, for example, loved Dracula and Wolfman and all those things. R.L. Stine was clearly influenced by these things, and so was Night of the Living Dummy, because the title alone is just one word away from being Night of the Living Dead. There are so many things out there that R.L. Stine's taking influence from old black and white horror films, but this is clearly one of those examples of those things that really deserve to be mentioned when you talk about Goosebumps, or you do a channel focused on Goosebumps like how I do. This film is fun, it's creepy, it's scary. The plot itself I actually really dig. It's a very simple premise in total. Basically, a brother and sister are going to their father's grave. They haven't really visited in a long time. They only come like once a year because the father's been dead for a very long time. The brother even mentions the fact that he can't remember how old the dad even was. The brother and sister are probably like maybe 19, 18, 20, somewhere in there. They're not very old. And they're driving out here just for the sake of their mom. Their mom wants them to come visit the 3-hour drive to go over to this grave. And they're leaving some flowers and praying and whatnot. And one of the things with this is that they happen to see a man in the graveyard. And of course it kind of scares the sister a little bit, but they're also joking, well mainly the brother's joking, about how when they were kids and their grandfather used to bring them up to the cemetery, how they were always scared that dead people would come back to life and come out of the ground and start coming after them. Well, this man that's walking throughout the cemetery is very weird. He's kind of straggling along. He's just kind of wandering and wobbling all over the place, and he starts kind of wandering over to them, even though the sister is starting to get scared because her brother keeps messing with her. And the brother delivers the terrifying, and still to me, to this day, I would say this is one of the most spine-tingling, chilling lines ever in a movie. The way he delivers it, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." Yeah, that was not a good spine-tingling version of that, but I'm just saying the way he says it in the film, that line is so iconic. Everybody knows that line. Pretty much. Everybody that's like 20, I would say, or maybe 25, more so like myself. This film, I love from the build-up here where the guy in the cemetery attacks the brother and sister, may or may not have killed the brother by knocking him over and the brother hit the back of his head on a tombstone. He may or may not be dead, we don't know. But he goes on to chase the sister all the way to this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And at first she thinks she's alone. And this part really gets to me every single time. My favorite scare in the film is the thing at the top of the stairs. And I won't tell you what that is, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you've seen the film, which a lot of people watching this may or may not have, I don't really know, but I think you might have, or at least seen this particular moment somewhere. The thing at the top of the steps scares me every time. I won't spoil it for you, like I said. But every time I watch this movie, and remember, I only saw Night of the Living Dead when I was probably maybe 20, as the first time I saw it, somewhere around there. And I've watched it about 3 or 4 times since I saw it back in high school. No, it's probably like, I was probably 16 or 17 the first time I saw the movie. But anyway, that's not the point. Every time I've seen this film, that thing at the top of the stairs scares me every single time. It always gets to me. I don't know what it is about that. Just the execution of that scene. It just shows you what a lower budget movie could do. Doesn't matter. This film is timeless. I mean, I genuinely think it's one of those things that will always be scary. It's not one of these things like The Quiet Place, where, yeah, the tension's there, but I don't think it's necessarily scary. The idea of people coming out of the grave, coming back, coming to eat people, eat their skin specifically is what the film talks about, because they keep saying flesh eaters, not just like the whole person, just the skin. That stuff is scary to me. It always has been. I know it can't come real, but I'm just saying the fact that this whole idea is there in general. Somebody came up with this idea in their head. It's terrifying, and I love the premise. I think it is genuinely scary. And of course, as the girl, Barbara is her name, by the way, while she's hanging out in this farmhouse, more people start to arrive, and it kind of just builds and builds and builds this really scary ending. But one of the big things the film does is something that Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock, very notable film that everybody knows as well, it kind of does the same thing Psycho did. All of a sudden, Barbara's not the main character anymore. We jump over to another man named Ben. And Ben is awesome. I love Ben. He just wants to get stuff done and he wants to be safe. That's it. Ben is so tough, and I just love watching him do things. I know a lot of people talk in recent years, and George Romero said himself before he died, that Ben, the guy playing Ben, wanted to change the scenes to be less mean. Like, less just angry and trying to be more of like a gentle sweetheart type guy. I think it would have ruined the film. I don't care what George Romero or anybody says. I think it would have ruined the movie because it would have just killed out what made Ben so tough and made you root for him. He's the hero. He's genuinely the hero of the story, in my opinion. But you have so many great scenes, like the gas scene, for example. The film is just filled to the brim with iconic moments that no one talks about anymore, especially people my age, which pisses me off, because people that are 25, like myself, they should know about this movie, especially if they're big fans of Walking Dead, like how everybody is. If this weren't around, you wouldn't have Walking Dead. You wouldn't. Robert Kirkman wouldn't have written the comics, and you wouldn't have the show. It's just too good. If you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, you're missing out. And even if it's in black and white, even if it's an older film from '68, it's pretty gory. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's some pretty gruesome moments, especially for its time, that probably started the big push for gore in movies now. I mean, it could have, honestly. But it's great. It really is a really solid, scary movie. I recommend it. Now, the zombies themselves, they're not really like rotting and decayed. Now you have to remember, this is part of a series, like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead come after this. Then you have the horrible remakes and whatnot. You have prequel films now. You have all kinds of stuff. There's the idea that since John Russo, or Russo, whatever his name is, wrote the novella for this, that he also wrote the novella for Return of the Living Dead. There's a rumor that says Return of the Living Dead is kind of like its own fan sequel type thing, even though it's really not. But I'm just saying, it's out there. There's a lot of stuff talked about with this series, but honestly, this is really the only one I love. Out of all the Night of the Living Dead, or anything tying into this first film, even the remake from 1990, which I don't like, because I don't think it's all that great. This is the only one I love. I don't even like Dawn of the Dead that much. I like the remake from Zack Snyder, that's about it. But this movie, again, even the music is haunting. It's just a creepy movie in general. The acting is great, the atmosphere is great, the directing from, Romero, I think, is just iconic. There's no other word for it. There's no other way to describe it short of that. It's just a great movie. It's just a really great movie, and you don't see movies made like this anymore, and you don't see this kind of movie celebrated anymore. It's kind of like if you took the first Halloween from John Carpenter and put it out in theaters now, people would not like it. They wouldn't. It's very slow. I think modern audiences would hate that if it wasn't released back in those days. If it was released now, people would hate it and say it's boring. They did the same thing with The Exorcist. People laughed throughout The Exorcist when it got re-released and younger audiences got to go see it. Look that up if you don't believe me. But movies like this is timeless in my opinion, even compared to those two, like John Carpenter's Halloween and The Exorcist first film. I think this is better than both of those. I still love it more. If you love the Universal Monsters flicks like Frankenstein, Wolfman, all that stuff, and you haven't seen this for whatever reason, check it out. If you love Goosebumps and you want something really good to watch, check this out. Again, it's a little bit scarier than Goosebumps, for sure. But this is the kind of film kids loved back in those days. And it was just, it's great. It's really honestly a great movie. It's well made. And I enjoyed, especially for a low budget, to be so good. This is technically the most successful independent film that's ever existed. That's really iconic in that sense alone. But it comes with so much, dude, and I just love the movie so much. I forgot how good this was. I'm really glad I got a chance to sit down and rewatch it and talk about it here on the channel, because it means a lot to me. I wish I could have gotten to this during the month of October. I know it's only November 2nd, but still, it would have been nice to be able to talk about this during October and talk about how iconic it was and how much fun it was. But, you miss opportunities sometimes. But at least the review's out there now. I love the film. I think it's fantastic. And if I had to rate Night of the Living Dead, the 1968 version, of course, on a 5-star basis, hands down it's getting a 5 out of 5 stars from me. It is just such a good movie, and there's no other words for it. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on what you think of the film. Put your thoughts and comments down there, please. Let me know what you think about it. What do you think about the rest of the series? I probably won't talk about those, because those are a little bit more like rated R style type movies. You could argue this one is too, but still, I mean, I don't want to talk about the other ones. I like just talking about this one, the black and white ones that are clearly a big influence on like Goosebumps and R.L. Stine and whatnot. But still, what are your thoughts? Put them down below on everything, including the series. Thank you so much for watching. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today. Have a good weekend, guys. God bless. Goodbye.